Okay, Allie, let's get it started. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm John Boylan, president of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce. Real excited to co-host this event today, and we'll talk about and thank all of our sponsors and participants in a moment. But I just wanted to say, much like a lot of things, you don't realize how important they are until you lose them. And we've lost our freedom, the ability to do business as normal. But we're going to talk today about how do we get that back, right? How do we think about the future? I know oftentimes with the webinar, sometimes you're trying to cheat and look at your cell phone, send it a text. I'm telling you, the folks that we've got today keyed up, you don't want, put down your cell phone because you want some insight on the future. You want some tips, not just on stocks, Victor. If you want some tips on thinking about how to recover, this is where it's going to happen. So we're excited to have you join us. Wait till the end. We're going to do a Q&A session. So if you have questions, you can use the Q&A. We'll get those populated towards the end of the day. But I wanted to first introduce Doug Pickford. Doug is the president for the Dulles Area Transportation Alliance, and really proud to do a number of these events with Doug. And the relationship we have between the chamber and data is really valuable. So Doug, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. Hey, we are definitely going into uncharted territory, but I do believe the panelists we have lined up here today can provide us with some really valuable insights and advice. For those of you who are participating, thank you for joining us today. If you don't know much about the Dulles Area Transportation Association, I'm just going to give a quick plug. We're a community-based nonprofit. We work primarily with employers trying to find sustainable commuting options for their employees. We provide our technical services free of charge for the most part. And during this transition and thereafter, if you would like to avail yourselves of our services, we'll be sending out a follow-up email to this webinar in the next couple of days with our contact information on it. And feel free to contact us at any time. I'd also like to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce, Fairfax County Economic Development Authority, McKinsey and Company, and then our participants from the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. Let's all give them a big E-clap. Standing ovation, awesome. Let's get on with the program. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Lauzon. I'm sorry, I butchered your name there. but Allie is operations associate with McKinsey and Company. She focuses on capital projects and infrastructure in the North American market. Prior to that, she was a program manager in the Virginia Office of Public and Private Partnerships. She has an MBA out of the Yale School of Management. She's also the co-president of Young Professionals in Infrastructure. And last year, Allie was named 2019 Emerging Leader of the Year, American Road Transportation Builders Association. So quite a resume. Turn it over to you, Allie.
Thank you so much, Doug and John, both for the introductions and for creating the space for this discussion today. So before we kind of launch into the program, and I know you all want to hear the amazing panelists we have, just wanted to lay a few kind of logistics for the day. So I will be your moderator and your guide. You will be on mute for this session. Please use the Q&A to ask any questions that you have as we go, and the chat to make any comments that you might have. I will try to address the questions and weave them into the discussion, and if I'm not able to, we will try to get to them and save some time at the end of the session to make sure your questions are considered. So with that out of the way, we have a very serious and mega topic to cover today in our 50 minutes or 55 minutes that are left. A topic which we are all feeling in different ways, whether that's taking this webinar from your kitchen counter like myself, or with your child on your lap, or even one of the few people back in the office today. So we'll try to have some fun as we go through this. We have a great, exceptional group of leaders, and I'm thrilled to introduce them to you. So to start with, we have Jerome Davis, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer at the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. In this role, Jerome is the highest ranking official under the CEO. He directs all commercial and revenue-related activities for Reagan National, and Dulles International Airports, including the airline business development, marketing, and consumer strategy, real estate development, concessions, corporate communications, and government affairs. Since joining MWA in 2014, revenue has steadily increased, with non-airline revenue climbing from 49% of total revenues in 2016 to 57% in 2019. He also serves on the board of directors of Destination DC. He has extensive executive leadership and marketing experience in leading large, complex, growth-oriented global organizations with revenues exceeding $3.5 billion and more than 23,000 employees. Additionally, he has been involved in major transformations through senior leadership positions at some of America's top corporations. Next, we have Bryan Hill, County Executive at Fairfax County. He was appointed as the 10th County Executive in 2017. He oversees the annual development and approval of the county's multi-billion-dollar budget. He also manages the daily operations of the organization, which includes 12,000 employees, providing support and services to Fairfax County's 1.3 million residents. Additionally, he's leading the development of a county-wide strategic plan and overseeing the implementation of One Fairfax, the county's joint social and racial equity policy, and doing all this while navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, which we'll launch into shortly. And finally, he serves on the Commission of Fire Accreditation International, representing county managers, and is a member of the International City and County Management Association's Advisory Board on Graduate Education. Next, we have Victor Hoskins, who is President and CEO of Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. Victor transitioned to this role in August 2019. Previously, he was the Director of Arlington Economic Development since 2015. In that role, he led the team to attract Amazon HQ2, a deal that will bring up to 38,000 Amazon jobs to Arlington, stimulate creation of another 75,000 jobs in the region, and generate up to $4.8 billion in revenue for the Commonwealth. Since he arrived at the authority, Google, Facebook, Amazon Web Services, and King Spalding have announced locations in Fairfax County. And not to mention, Microsoft announced a 400,000 square foot software R&D center, the largest transaction in Northern Virginia for 2020. Previously, he worked in private real estate investment on Wall Street, and he also served as deputy mayor on economic development for DC. During his career, his work has resulted in almost 375,000 jobs, and he has led the teams that negotiated more than 700 major business deals, resulting in billions of dollars in private investment. And finally, Victor received the 2019 Ronald Kirby Award for Collaborative Leadership from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Last but not least, Ben Saffron is an associate partner in the DC office of McKinsey & Company, where his work focuses on capital projects, infrastructure, and economic development. He has led capital planning and portfolio optimization efforts, economic development strategies, and operations transformations with a focus on state and local government entities. Prior to joining McKinsey, Ben worked in the World Bank and in real estate development based in Washington, DC. As you can see, we have an all-star panel of speakers here today, and I'm actually going to turn it over so you can hear them all speak, with putting the ball in Ben's court and asking him, McKinsey has been doing a bunch of research and understanding of what's happening right now in our world and in the DC area. So Ben, can you give us a kind of overview of what the impact of COVID-19 has been on local and national economies?
Awesome. Thanks, Allie. Will do. And being from McKinsey, we can't help but share a few charts here, and we wanted to anchor the conversation in some of the data, but frankly, I'll go through really quick because the insight and experience and innovation that Jerome, Victor, and Bryan are all doing is what is going to be really exciting to hear. So, so very quickly, just when we look at the depth and duration of COVID-19 impacts, depending on the scenario, and probably depending on if you're an optimist or pessimist, we're talking about the economic impacts that have already likely exceeded the level of the Great Recession, and frankly, getting to a depth that we have not seen in the U.S. almost since the Great Depression, right? And so a lot of uncertainty in terms of how the virus containment is going to unfold. I think sort of challenging outcomes over the past week or so, but if we look at, again, the depth of GDP contraction, levels we haven't seen, frankly, in several decades. If you take forward, Ali, I think the second piece around the economic impact, so as we think about, go ahead one more, Ali.
Sorry.
If we think about who is impacted, right? Because we know that the impacts have frankly not been evenly spread and shared. And so we've looked at where are there vulnerable jobs that are experiencing reduction in terms of the hours worked, the risk of furlough or risk of layoff. You do see disproportionately share of occupations and sectors bearing the brunt. So we know accommodation and food service, entertainment, personal service, retail, more so than professional services, IT, and other jobs. If you actually add this all up, more than 80% of the vulnerable jobs are jobs that nationally are jobs that are less than $40,000 in income. And so really, it's a lot of those folks that can at least stand these negative shocks that are experiencing the challenges and the hardship. I think, for our region, one silver lining is we do have a disproportionate share of, as you said in your alley, in your intro, some of the successes in Fairfax and elsewhere, a disproportionate share of those more resilient jobs. And so we're projecting less of those impacts, but still, I think important to just recognize that in many ways, the vulnerable and lower income jobs and individuals are the ones that are experiencing an outsized share of the impacts. And then I think just lastly, if we translate this to what have the impacts been around our infrastructure and transportation, what we have here is thinking both about airline ridership and transit ridership. The white bar represents the impacts from 9/11, from September 2000 to September 2001. And so air travel was down 10%, transit ridership down a little less than 10%. If you look at the financial crisis, less impact than that, about -5 to 8%. But COVID has frankly been more dramatic, 60% in terms of the reduction in airline travel. If you look at transit ridership, depends on the mode. Bus has been a little bit less impacted, depends on the geography, but as much as 90+% impact. And so maybe lastly, just if you actually want to take ahead 2 slides, Ali, I think a part of the discussion today, and really keen to hear from Victor, Jerome, and Bryan, but one of the challenges is how do you plan to demand with the uncertainty? And so, we think about this in a series of stages and phases: the crisis hitting, recovery, ramp up, potential, second spike. How do we think about the behavior? How do we think about the safeguards? How do we think about the changes in business operations? So obviously, really complex picture with a lot of uncertainty as we forecast forward. And so, with that, I wanted to set the stage, but really, really excited to be part of the discussion and also hear, frankly, I know a lot of innovation that three other gentlemen here are taking part of.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben, for sharing those, opening remarks. And I think one thing you hit on, some of the economic impacts and the joblessness. And, I'm going to kick it over to Victor now to kind of expand a little bit more on that and really talk about what have been some of those economic impacts across employment, occupations, GDP, in the DC region over the past few months.
Yes, this has been a really, I think the speed with which this happened is probably the most dramatic part of this. We have over 100,000 unemployment claims in Fairfax County since this started back in March. That is an immense amount of people. But even more than that, if you back it up and look at the region, I just saw a report yesterday from the Fuller Institute, over 300,000 people have lost their jobs in the greater DC region. The unemployment rate for DC has jumped up to, for the DC region overall, it's jumped up to 9.9%. For Fairfax County specifically, we're at 10.1%. And we haven't seen those numbers in Fairfax County ever. It's a number that we're not familiar with. And, you know, Ben was just saying that we probably haven't had a crisis like this since the Great Depression. The difference is that this was actually self-imposed for health reasons. So we do have some control over the reopening. And I think that's probably the bright side of it. But as Ben pointed out, is disproportionately food and beverage, hospitality, retail workers, you know, some of our lowest wage earners in our economy. And that is, you know, they were already on the edge, and this has pushed many of them into very, very dire straits. So that's kind of the unemployment picture. On the GDP side, there's going to be a tremendous retraction in GDP. We've had GDP growth consistent since 2014. Every quarter since 2014, we have had regional, and I'm talking region again, regional DC region, consistent growth. And this growth is something that we kind of, in a way, took for granted. As a matter of fact, prior to the beginning of March, our unemployment rate in Fairfax County was 2.1%. Unemployment rate in the region was about 3%. We were clocking some of the lowest unemployment rates in history and some of the unemployment rates in the country. To go from that to where we are right now is tough. But when we look at other markets, in a way, we're a bit more resilient. Specifically, the government sector has provided us resilience. In addition to that, the fact that we have so many technology companies and cybersecurity, data analytics, data science, robotics, drone, these have all, and, you know, the cloud computing industry has exploded here. These have all really undergirded our economy. And the fact that we just closed Microsoft, 400,000 square feet, 1,500 jobs, that is a huge deal in this environment. So we have managed to really, in this great pain, have less pain in other regions. If you look at other regions, I mean, I really, you know, feel sorry for regions like Las Vegas, for example, 25% in Nevada unemployment, 20+% in Washington State. These are places where they have a greater dependence on other portions of the economy, like hospitality. And that really, unfortunately, has put them in a very complicated position. We have more resilience here. As a matter of fact, there was a study, I believe it was by McKinsey, where it ranked us among the top 10 most resilient regional economies in the nation. You know, so it has been a hard hit. It's been a tough hit. We have had others. Fortunately, the others have been less dramatic. This one's far more dramatic. A lot of our destiny is hooked to the airport. A lot of our destiny is hooked to our public transportation. So that creates a special problem for us. But I'm going to let others talk now. But suffice it to say, this has been a real punch in the gut. But there is a silver lining, and the silver lining is that we have so much tech here and an ability to come back. And we have a board of supervisors, a county executive, people who have understand the problem, and we'll be talking about it later on, but they've had some tremendous responses to it. Thank you.
No, thank you. You opened up a perfect segue about resiliency and how our transportation is a big enabler in the region. And so, you know, I'm going to kind of, that's Jerome's, you know, court side right there. And Jerome, would love to hear kind of what you are seeing from MWA and how transportation is being affected within the past few months.
Allie, let me see if I can paint a picture for you. Victor, the way you laid it out, it was so right in terms of that impact. At Reagan National and at Dulles, the hit was immediate. Business closures, stay-at-home orders, travel bans. That's a recipe for disaster. And at the end of the day, like most segments of the economy, COVID-19 is putting enormous pressure on transportation, particularly airlines, airports, anything that's quite frankly affiliated with doing business with airports. Let me paint a picture for you that will give you some perspective in terms of the dramatic hit that has happened. We're coming off about, call it 5 to 10 years of steady growth. Every year delivering numbers that were to the upside. And that financial impact was great because we were able to turn things around at Dulles, number one, get Dulles on track for being an airport that's international, that can grow. Meanwhile, DCA, Reagan National, was doing well also. January, February of 2020, phenomenal months. We were on pace to deliver the same kind of performance we had delivered for the last 5 to 10 years. It didn't happen. In March, the bottom fell out. In April, everything fell out. And let me give you a little perspective in terms of operationally what I mean by that. Airplane movements, down 67%. Passenger screenings, down 88%. Parking, which is a very key revenue for the airport. It's the largest non-airline revenue of any airport in the world. So it's that important to every airport. Down 91%. Taxis, TNCs, down 97%. Car rentals, down 99%. Concession sales, down 90%. Because the one thing that you don't have at the airports are what? Passengers. If you don't have passengers, the business model is tough. You don't have people buying other things. And with all the stay-at-home orders, the other things that took place in the business, that put a lot of pressure on airports. The performance that we've had over the previous several years gave us the financial wherewithal to be in a very good position right now. So we're not at risk on any of those fronts. But in terms of saying what needs to turn this thing around the most, is the fact that we have to get passengers back at the airport, because when you think about how we all go to market, particularly with airports, think of airports as nothing but facilities that enable the public to be able to transfer from one plane to another to go to a destination. And once you start to mess with that traffic, a lot of other things start to get impacted. Now, also put in perspective that we have about 190 plus stores, from retail to newsstands, restaurants, food and beverage. We have about 190 plus stores at both airports. Only 20% of them right now are open. So if you challenged me and you said, Jerome, go open up more stores tomorrow, why? Right now, the few airports can't even get their fair share of business because there's not enough demand inside the airport. So I echo all those things to say to you that the priority for us right now is around how do we put a lot of energy into getting the airports ready. And so we're putting a lot of time and effort into safety, making sure that the airports will be ready when we rebound and relaunch our efforts, because we will do that. But in order to get a sense of the demand of what has happened to transportation in our area, that gives you a pretty good picture of the negative impact it has had on the business. Okay.
Thank you, Jerome. Those huge impacts, from businesses to transportation to people's lives. And Bryan, you know, sitting on the local government side as a government official, kind of what have you seen the response, and how are you kind of in Fairfax County really trying to address some of these impacts that are happening?
Well, what's fascinating is Fairfax County has great partners. I mean, you have Jerome and Victor here on this call, and we understand what they're going through and what we're going through collectively. Having a great board of supervisors that I have, I mean, I am so blessed to be led by Chairman Jeff McKay and the rest of the board members. We have put a plan in place to basically bring Fairfax forward. You know, we coined the phrase probably before the state did, but since we are not the state, we can't really say it's our phrase. When you look at the way the CARES Act funding has come forward, Fairfax County being the only county in the Commonwealth that is over 500,000. We are 1.2 million. We got direct allocation from the Treasury Department. Immediately, our board has put $25 million to a RISE program for small businesses to help facilitate the change or the bring back of people. 90% of business in Fairfax County is 50 people or less. I believe 93% are 10 or less. So we understood that we needed to have some nice things to help bring back that type of business. We put $20 million for basic needs support because, as you heard Victor state, our unemployment rate is quite high for Fairfax County. Maybe not for Las Vegas or Washington and other areas, but our unemployment rate is pretty high for us right now. So we look for basic food, housing, and utility assistance for many of our residents in the neighborhood of $20 million. And then we also provided a $5 million stimulus grant to support nonprofits in the county safety net providers. So we were really looking at all over what we could do. We also did a $34 million in support for public health. So thinking about bringing back and getting us open, listening to Victor, listening to Jerome and many others, that $34 million went out to contact tracing and our ability to find COVID, because I do a podcast every 2 weeks. Sometime in March, I did a COVID podcast, and I said COVID-19, 20, and 21. People must realize until there's a cure for this, we're going to be in this, how do we maintain being open, or do we close? And I cannot see us closing again. I don't see us having that resiliency to have another closure like we've had in the past. So we're doing things internally to ensure that we are making sure that we're good. We've spent a lot of money on PPE, personal protective equipment, to ensure that our county government employees are remaining safe and sound. Like the first and key thing for me as a county executive of the largest jurisdiction in the Commonwealth is to ensure that each and every person that works for our county is safe and sound as they do their job, because we have not closed county operations. Many counties have been closed. We have continued to move forward. So those are the things that we've done to put in place, but it's about our great leadership and great guidance that we get from the board, people like Victor and Jerome and the many others that are around our county. We are a collective team. We work as a team, and that's how we have gotten through this to this point.
Awesome. Yeah, amazing work going on in Fairfax County. And I know, Ben, you've also been working with, counties and governments across the country. When it comes to reopen and recovery, I mean, what are you seeing? What kind of stuff are other counties and what is the nation seeing? And how does that potentially relate to some of the stuff that Bryan was just mentioning?
Yeah, thanks, Allie. And I think actually we heard several common themes that we hear in a lot of places. So I think this progression of, at first it was crisis management, really thinking about relief, right? How do we provide relief as quickly and targeted as possible? Because we wanted to make sure our small businesses didn't go bankrupt. We wanted to make sure there wasn't sort of contagion more broadly, right? And so I think a lot of innovation happening in this region. I think, if you look nationally, certain states putting up job platforms to try to match more of the millions of unemployed with the places that we're hiring and surge opportunities and thinking about individuals. I think recently, a lot of the focus has transitioned into the reopening question, and we're really seeing a mosaic of different approaches in different regions and states. And frankly, it's challenging, especially when you think about both the sort of national, international connectivity and in very specifically, managing assets like Jerome is that are, as many of the decisions you make are dependent on decisions others are making too, right? And so thinking about the reopen question is next, and I think increasingly then asking, what does the recovery look like and what does it look like beyond, right? How do we actually accelerate that recovery? I think a couple of sort of common principles that this group touched on, really important to keep in mind. you know, the speed that Victor mentioned and the uncertainty, just requiring really ruthless focus on the data and trying to be as targeted as possible. The impacts are going to be greater than the resources we have. And I think the places that are looking across health, economic, the types of populations that are being impacted and targeting that's been a common theme to try to respond with the same speed Victor mentioned. I think the second piece, I mean, I love what you said, Bryan, on the collaboration, right? And that's both across public leaders, but I think we've also seen the public and private sector collaborations, whether it's CEO groups coming forward and saying, we want to share what we're doing and the best practices that others can adopt it. And by the way, you know, local officials are a great platform and megaphone to try to, you know, help promote more of that sharing that happens. And having them part of the reopen decision has been another big piece. And then I think the last piece, which, you know, Jerome touched on and it's just playing out, is just the acceleration of some of the trends and disruptions that was happening, especially with sort of digital disruptions. So we've had, you know, I mean, one quote, a bank CEO said, my 2-year digitization strategies happened in 2 months, right? And that these new ways of working are going to be here to stay. And it's frankly taking everybody's maybe multi-year agenda and making it happen in a really short time span. And so I know Jerome's thinking about a lot of innovations on that front too, but I think we just recognize technology is going to have to help us change the way business happens. And those places and businesses that are sort of embracing that are, I think, the ones that are positioned to be more resilient, right, or positioned to hopefully weather more strongly. So just a few common themes and frankly, you know, underscoring some of the points that everybody made here.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point and a question that we actually had. And Bryan, I'm going to segue back to you about kind of this, you know, 2 months of innovation that might have happened in 2 years, as Ben was saying. What is kind of your short and long term kind of planning changing? How are you thinking about those 2 time horizons right now as we think about recovery?
I think you said that's for me, right?
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, darn. Okay. You know, when you think about the future and you think about today, you got to put it in buckets as far as I'm concerned. You know, every decision we make is about education, it's about business, and then it's about the government. And how do you work collaboratively to get all 3 going at the same time? You know, I look at what we've done just recently with reducing our tax penalties and our late fees. Things like that kind of showcase that we are in a really good position. We're a AAA county. We have great financial management. We have prepared for things like this. However, no one can prepare for what we considered COVID-19, but we have the tools in place to allow us to move forward. So when I hear people say about the resiliency that this region has, it is absolutely true. 9 of the 9 AAA counties live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. 9. 4 of them are right here, but 9 of us are AAA, which means we have supreme ability to be able to be flexible and resilient when things like this happen. We have strong financial management tools, and to go into the future, we're doing strategic planning to think about where we're going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now. So we try to get ahead of the curve. People like Victor Hoskins bringing in Microsoft and quadrupling, I'm not even sure, I don't know the number of how I could say we went from a little bit to a heck of a lot, but it wasn't quadruple, it was a lot more than that. Those are the types of things that bring us to this resilient place that we are. Fairfax County doesn't look at this as a bad thing, COVID. We're looking at the opportunities that allow us to be better. And I will tell you this, I have 65% of my team doing telework right now. I don't know if you come back to me in a year from now, I might have 85% doing telework, because we are still pushing the envelope to see the new way of doing business. Look at us on this Zoom call. Who would have thought we would have a webinar and a Zoom call during COVID-19? Who ever thought about COVID-19? Well, thinking ahead and putting yourself in place to ensure you can handle the challenges that you are presented are key to a good county and obviously having good partners.
Yeah, Brian, and I think you kind of hit on that resiliency and, the Microsoft deal and the businesses in the region. And so Victor, from your standpoint in dealing with these businesses on a day-to-day basis, what are you seeing in terms of the way that businesses are responding from a health safety perspective for their customers and their clients, and how are they planning to really reopen and recover?
Well, the thing is that the businesses are in such different positions right now. I mean, actually, Ben mentioned the process of really trying to match the surge hiring with those that are laying off. That was really kind of the first phase, and we went through that with Walmart Labs, AWS, and a bunch of other companies, Amazon, that were hiring and connecting them to the hospitality industries and others that were laying off, particularly for retail and client-facing services that have really lost out on this. The challenge has been, figuring out, okay, what do you do next to help them safely move back in? Well, the great thing is that actually the state government has really laid out great guidelines, and those guidelines have been obviously complemented and really embraced by the county chair McKay and the board of supervisors, as well as the county executive. So that in a way, they've really laid out the roadmap for us to help businesses reenter. And a big part of this reentry has to do with, number one, protecting their customers as they enter the place and protecting the person that's serving them. And because so much of the businesses that shut down were retail, hair salons, gyms, all the things, by the way, that all of us need. Even I need to cut my hair. A lot of challenges out there with just your personal care because you can't get to it. It is now being opened up and made possible for them to get back in business. The real part of this, though, happened actually before we hit this stage, which is access to capital. The county executive, the county board of supervisors put forth $25 million in grants for businesses to get back into business. And by the way, 83% of the 6,000 applicants were businesses with 10 employees or less. 10 employees or less. So really targeting the ones that were hurt the most. And I think that's really has been, critical. But at the same time, you have people on the other end of the spectrum that are still hiring in the technology arena. We have 32,000 job openings in Fairfax County right now, over 60,000 in Northern Virginia. So we have been doing these virtual career fairs. We did one back on May 28th. We had 30 universities involved. We had 13 companies that were hiring about 4,000, had 4,000 positions open. We had over 7 historically Black colleges involved. We had over 1,000 people interview. And we are now working on our second career fair, which is going to happen in July 14th. And in that one, we have groups like Northrop Grumman, GDIT, FireEye, Mantech, that are all still hiring, and there are people still being placed in these job opportunities. Now, this is mid-career. These are for people who are in their career, who are already professionals, and we're marketing this not just in this region, but up to 500 miles away, so that if they do get the job, they could easily move here. We believe that flight is still going to be a difficult thing, but we know that people drive. So we're really targeting New York. We're looking at Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and other places. But it's really, for us, it's working on both sides of the equation. Businesses that stayed open that are hiring, and businesses that are reopening. So it's really a ground game on many fronts. The great thing is that we have a great collaboration with the county, with their economic initiatives group, which is a great team of people who work every day with the small businesses. And they have been coordinating their services that are lending services and granting services with our technical assistance services to small business, so that they can open up safely and they can open up and financially survive.
Yeah, there's so much work going on in creating new job opportunities and, really getting those people back to work. And when you talk about getting back to work, me personally, I'm usually on a flight going every week, Monday out, Thursday back. And so, Jerome, I'm wondering from the transportation side, and especially like WMATA in the DC region, it's huge for commuters getting to their jobs in the city. You know, what role is transportation playing in the reopening, and how are you, your authority, thinking about getting passengers back?
We believe that, first off, let me just reinforce what both Bryan and Victor has said in terms of just that whole working relationship of how we bring together the best of what the counties do, combine that with what we're trying to do, and we consider counties like Fairfax stakeholders that can make a difference in terms of how we go out and represent this area to the airlines. Because to draw airlines to your market, you have to be able to create demand. You got to be able to tell a story. You got to be able to understand where those companies that are headquartering, where are they flying? Because then that becomes an opportunity for things to be able to happen at the airport. And I believe because of the nature of the high tech, the IT, the biomedical, the biopharma, engineering, professional services, all of that stuff plays very well into the future outlook for transportation. And so therefore, as we kind of do a reset, the one thing that I think has to stand out more so than anything right now, because passengers, former passengers are watching very closely, and that is, how will you convince me that it is safe to fly? That's a big time question. It's got a lot of different pieces to it, but that means that all the things that we're trying to do inside of the airport, and when you think of the airport, it's not just the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority employees. You have totally separate in terms of what they do for the airport, TSA, and then you also have your Customs Patrol, Border Patrol. They all have requirements, and those requirements are going to have to come together in a cohesive way to tell the story around safety, to be able to get that customer to want to say, I'm willing to travel again because I got a feeling that it is safe. And it's important not just for what that traveler may think on this end of the travel, but when they get to their destination, they have to have that confidence as well. So when you think about all the things that airports are doing, and this is why it's so important to note, because despite some of the declines, an airport never closes. Our airport has been fully operational during the entire COVID-19 and will continue to be that way. Our office staff have gone into telework, where about 90% of the folks are teleworking. We only have about the 10% at headquarters to take care of some of the day-to-day work. But the most important thing is, how do we build on that confidence to get people to want to show up at the airport? Let me run down a list of a few things that we've done that's going to make a difference. And we have to promote this. We have to talk about it. Our economic development partners have to talk about it. And by the way, airlines are going to be visiting our airports to see if we're meeting the standards. And that's how we all partner together and try to find ways to say, how do we not only get the airport back open at the speed in which we know it can be, but more importantly, how do we start to identify certain areas that we can fly to, because we're working closely with the economic development folks of the counties. When you go into, like, for example, Dulles or Reagan, you're going to see a lot of clear barriers at customer interaction points. The reason that we got that plexiglass up is because it's about protecting the passengers. You're going to see so many automatic hand sanitizers. You're going to think that you have to use a sanitizer about every 10 steps. Signage for social distancing, for face mask. You're going to see all of that. Of course, the state of Virginia, CDC says wear your mask. We're going to try to do everything in our power, even though we can't mandate it. We know that that is an advantage for the traveling public. We've converted our bathrooms to accessories to touchless operation. Enhanced cleaning protocols where just about every hour on the hour, the restrooms are clean. all of these things are critically important because we think that we have to tell that story to get people back and get them comfortable. Because unfortunately, a lot of people believe that in an airplane, if you don't get it right, the risk is high. Yet, when you think about working with the airlines in terms of spacing, when you start to look at all the things that you have to do and then get the customers on the plane to wear the mask, it's a lot that has to happen. And our job is to pull all that together so that our passengers will have the confidence that when they get on the plane, they have a predictable order of steps that they can take and know that they will be safe. That is critically important to us.
So, one of the other questions we had beyond just the airports, and Jerome and Ben, I know we've also at McKinsey done some transit work as well, is how do we feel that metro ridership might rebound? And what will we as a region move workers to the office if trust in public transit cannot be built with COVID kind of hovering overhead? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on transit or Ben, either of you.
The only comment I would make is that, we would like to think that when transit order get back to at least a point of being able to be used the way we all seen it being used before, there will be an opportunity to accelerate and get back to that baseline of where we've been. But I think what you're talking about, Ali, is more of what will be the breakthrough behind that. And Ben, you may have a few things you want to share along those lines, but I think that it's more about right now, there's been such a total reset. We have to be very mindful of being able to fill the capacity of what we have. And that to me is going to be a challenge given where we're at now. Because earlier, some of the projections that were given around when we think we may be coming out of this in the airline business, you're looking at probably 2022, 2023. That's a lot of time. So that's the thing that I think we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think there's not, Jerome, you're sort of asking as if there's a silver bullet we've seen or been thinking of, and I really don't think there's one out there. Not to be, pessimistic on it. If you actually had to apply social distancing requirements, 6 feet distance and in transit, you're actually talking about a transit system that probably on average is operating at 25% capacity, right? So it's a very challenging problem to think about when we think about new ways of working. I think we could look to some of the models in Europe and in Asia, right, that are maybe a little bit ahead of where we are in terms of the virus response. And, frankly, again, new ways of operating, new standards for, considering timing and capacity management. But I think the two sides of this are, I think, like you said, Jerome, expect a very slow recovery curve and frankly, dependent on what happens with a potential resurgence. I think also, frankly, trying to use it as an opportunity to manage demand and think about, again, connecting how much capacity of the system we end up using as the business community comes back online and how that gets ramped up. But a lot of uncertainty and not a silver bullet. And I think similarly, there's going to be a lot of different variables as that recovery curve comes back, and we're not expecting it to be months, right? It's likely years before you start to see ridership levels get there.
Yeah, and that's something they're peak shaving of people actually changing the time in which they commute to kind of even that out. And that would be maybe some businesses making decisions on changing hours. So Bryan, I'm gonna go back over to you. You've mentioned, working with your sponsors, and we're talking about transportation, we're talking about businesses, we're talking about all of these different entities. How are you bringing all of this together? And is there any kind of structured working groups in place, or how are we responding and really trying to bring all of the various perspectives together to create a comprehensive strategy going forward?
That's a great question. It's not one that you gave me as one of our prep questions. So let me, no, I'm just teasing. From an internal, I'm going to go internal, external. From an internal standpoint, our deputy county executives, our PIO, our chief equity officer, we've been working together pretty much since March 17th on internal messaging and strategies, working with the Board of Supervisors to provide them with the RISE grant, to provide them with how we're going to use CARES Act funding. The Department of Economic Initiatives that Victor mentioned was something that we developed less than a year ago. Who would have thought that a year into their game, and their game was supposed to think about small businesses and how we cultivate and keep them here in Fairfax County, as well as grow. And who would have thought that that Department of Economic Initiatives, led by Rebecca Maudry, would be so significant in how we move into 2020, 2021, 2022, as we look at the things that we need to have done to allow us to bring back business and allow people to move freely. Our Board of Supervisors has advisory groups, advisory boards that we all work with in the community. Victor and I basically, and I don't know why we started to do this, but we've been meeting with every Fortune 500 company in Fairfax County. We started doing that before COVID. We wanted to understand what they were thinking on how they were moving forward while things were good. Now we're talking to them about partnerships in affordable housing. How do we work together to do that so they can bring their teams closer to their offices? We've even had a couple companies during our call say they're going to expand operations and their footprint in Fairfax County simply because we went out and spoke to them. So to me, it's about being tireless. It's about being flexible. We look at our permitting. We're doing virtual permitting and inspections. Every county that I have worked in has said that we are business unfriendly. My goal is to change that here in Fairfax County. And being the most populous county in the Commonwealth, and we're going to be business friendly, that helps my friends that are on this call promote the area, promote the air travel, promote the businesses. If we don't figure out that we need to, if we don't understand that we need to work together, we're not going to get through this. And that's what our Board of Supervisors has been putting out to everybody. We are working collaboratively as a team. And if you can't work as a team, you probably need to go someplace else, because we are all working towards one goal, and that is a safe Fairfax County that is robust and has access and equity for all.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it sounds, just even from being on this call and how much all of you work together on a daily basis, a lot of what's happening in each one of your organizations is pretty touching. And so I think, we're running out of time here. So please, if you have any questions, there's been a few, send them in before time runs out. But I think moving from kind of thinking about that collaboration, and we've been talking about recovery, but there is potentially a huge long-term change here of just reimagining, the workforce and how people work. Do you have a big headquarters? Do you have half of your staff remote? So Victor, I'm curious from the business community if there's any discussion on kind of reimagination and what we've learned from here that might be a long-term change going forward.
A couple of things, and this is earlier, this acceleration in what technologies using distance operations.
I'm gonna,
Bryan mentioned also.
Victor, I'm gonna pause you. We have some weird static going on. You sound like a robot. I don't know if there's something with your audio.
Is that better?
Nope, it's still a little funky.
That's probably my Wi-Fi.
All right, well, we'll let Victor, if you reconnect your audio, we'd love to hear what you have to say there. But I think I might put the question over to Ben, kind of reimagination, and what are some of the lessons learned and long-term changes we might expect kind of moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think, exciting discussion here. You know, one of the tenets we've said is how do we actually look at some of the challenges that the COVID crisis has exposed and actually say, let's address those challenges, right? Let's attack back the places that the crisis has negatively impacted and actually use that as an opportunity to create the economic future we want to create, right? And so whether that is, you know, thinking about more inclusive growth, right? More broad-based income growth and trying to unlock, you know, greater productive potential of some of the, you know, population groups that have not experienced some of the same gains and benefits. Whether we look at some of the skills and talent investments and especially the digital skills that we need for, you know, the future resilient sectors. As we think about, you know, obviously the infrastructure investments, but also the digital infrastructure. We haven't talked as much about what are those type of enabling investments that need to happen. And then I think also just, you know, recognizing when we have looked at past recessions, those geographies that invest countercyclically in innovation, in trying to promote that type of creativity in the downturn are those that outperform afterwards. And so, you know, I think keeping an eye on how you promote innovation, how you know, attract, whether it's venture capital investment, startups and entrepreneurs that are going to be the future economic engines for the region. You know, the empirical evidence shows in past recessions, those places that can invest in those areas can and will ultimately be healthier, more robust in terms of growth afterwards. And I think, you know, in the meantime, also, you know, there's, I think, a big question around what the future of our cities are going to look like and urban environments, and how do we actually think about what the future of our cities are going to be, and how to try to cultivate, you know, what have frankly been our engines of productivity over the recent past. So, you know, a lot of areas, and it's frankly going to have to, you know, many places tailoring to the local context around the priorities of the region. But I think some of the discussion today suggests, you know, now's the time to be bold around all the funding and investment that's coming in, and actually use it as an opportunity to try to plan for not just recover back to where we were, right, but plan for a new future and try to address some of those challenges in the economic system that this has exposed.
Well, we are just about to run up to time here, and that's, you know, leaving on a very high note there. But one last thing, I guess, before I want to do just a quick round robin with you all of, you know, quick 10, 20 second kind of what has been your biggest lesson learned from the past few months that you will remember for, you know, the rest of your roles as you are here and wherever you might go next. So Bryan, I'm going to kick it off to you first, and then we'll go Jerome, Victor, Ben, and Jatinder Khosla will close us out.
I will say quickly that tomorrow's never promised. On February 25th, I presented a budget that I thought was spot on. On April 7th, I reversed and had to present another budget that is not spot on, but we're working towards making it a resilient place. So tomorrow's never promised, and I've been telling my team, think as big as you possibly can. And if it's a good idea, we're going to run with it. And if it's not a good idea, keep thinking.
So, Jerome, you're on mute. Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
yep.
my comment would be, I think we've learned a tremendous amount about supply chains with this entire event. And as we continue to go through it, it's making you think about not only your supply chain, but who are your partners? And then also from a financial standpoint, I don't care how prepared you thought you were in terms of being able to deal with a very adverse situation. COVID-19 was a reality check to say that it makes no difference how much you plan, you got something that caught you off guard. And so therefore, when I think about what we need to be positioned for in the future, is to make sure that the financial aspects of what we do are buttoned up, and that's why we feel good about where we're at today. And then be in a position where when we need things based on change, we can get them immediately, because speed means everything to customers.
And from my standpoint, I do believe that we really not. Can you hear me?
It's
We're working.
it's just very muffled, but I think we can kind of get what you're saying more or less.
So I'll jump in. We'll get Victor's the transcript of all his insights, because I know we'll be keen to get them, and having worked with Victor, know all the innovation he's thinking about. But I might echo a little bit what Jerome says, right? Like, spending a lot of time trying to forecast the future and think about scenario planning, recognizing there was 3 months ago, no scenario that incorporated this type of dramatic change that we could have seen. And so I think, recognizing the only thing we know about our forecast is they're wrong. We're just not sure in which direction. But that those places that are positioned to weather the storm and be more resilient are coming from individual resilience and the creativity and the problem solving and new approaches, and sort of accepting and being adaptable and agile about responding to that, and trying to do it in a way that is as fact-based and as targeted as possible. It's been, it's been amazing to see, given the speed and the magnitude of the change, just how much creativity and innovation has already come, and I think will be needed in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. And Jatinder is going to close it out for us.
Thank you, Ali. Boy, that hour sure flew by. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for sharing their thoughts as businesses in our region start planning for the road to recovery. Thank you also to our audience for being here with us today. All of you will receive a follow-up email asking for your input on other topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thank you again for your attention, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you.